Welcome to Securing the Future podcast with your hosts Jesse Metters and Ramin Lamay, where we discuss the latest cutting-edge technologies and how they are affecting the security industry. Join us as we explore the latest advancements and discuss how these innovations are shaping the future of security. With Jesse, a skilled recruiter, and Ramin, a seasoned security leader, this is the show where industry expertise meets in-depth discussions.
We are back again for another episode of Securing the Future podcast with my co-host, Ramin Lamay. Ramin, let everyone know what your voice sounds like.
What's up, guys? Welcome back.
Ramin is not wearing a V-neck today, so he has broken protocol. And we also have a special guest, Marty Hetzel, who is also not wearing a V-neck. So we have just completely destroyed the V-neck option, but we'll try to get it back next time around.
But Jesse is wearing a deep V-neck.
Deep V.
Very deep.
Double V, if you've ever seen the Ben Stiller skit. All right. Well, today we're really excited to talk about what is happening in the hiring market for security leadership, as well as kind of how leaders are looking at the market right now. Our last episode, we had a chance to interview Yuri Diogenes. We talked about building a career in cybersecurity. We were much more focused on kind of entry level to mid-level. This time around, we're really focusing more on the leadership as well as from two perspectives, right? Like what's going on in the market for leaders trying to hire for their teams right now in 2023, September 2023. And also, what is it like for a security leader who we've unfortunately seen this quite commonly this year, that was displaced from their job and is having to go out and actually look for a job, which was not normal a year ago, right? It was very different back then. So that's the focus that we're going to get into today. Ramin, did you want to mention anything before we get going here?
No, like you said, we're excited to have Marty on. Marty's gone through quite an experience over the past, 6 months? So let's just dive into his experience and see what he's learned through it.
Absolutely. Well, I think as a starting point, real quick, we definitely want to dive into just a brief overview of what we're seeing in the job market. And again, me being in the recruiting space and have filled a variety of security leadership roles, I kind of get to see this at a little bit of a broader level. So we saw a couple things, right? First, this market's very different from a year and a half ago, and there's a variety of macroeconomic factors. And I think that macroeconomic has become the most popular term for people that never used it before. We're all saying macroeconomic factors, but it's true, right? The security budgets are being cut. There's been a lot of layoffs for top leadership, mid-level, as well as engineering talent. And also accountability for security leaders is kind of at the highest point that it's ever been, right? We've got cybersecurity insurance and all of the payouts that have been happening because of ransomware. There's a variety of factors here that are contributing to all of the changes, the pressure for security leaders, as well as the contraction of the market. Ramin, anything else you want to add from your perspective as a security leader?
Yeah, we talked about this before. We've seen a shift in more outsourcing as well. So security being kind of more seen as like a line item on a budget versus value add to an organization. So we're seeing decisions to outsource that. We're seeing decisions to outsource more managed services and monitoring and a lot of the capabilities. And in my side of what I do see more of a ramp up there. So I see more opportunities doing consulting for companies that are looking to spend less externally versus what they were internally. And it's just kind of a shift. And I almost, in my own head, have a theory going, wondering for the people that are more seasoned in their career, is it a better opportunity going to the consulting side and putting yourself in those pools while the market figures itself out, which is kind of similar to what I'm doing more of, right? Going more towards the consulting side. I have my own company, but then I also get into a couple different pools where I can be leveraged at a specific rate working with private equity or working with insurance companies. And those are where I can bring my expertise, my experience, and get quick jobs. And they have a pretty straightforward timelines, and it's work out there. So I do see that shift as well. And I am starting to slowly see a little bit more hiring as well, getting a little bit more focus on security. A A lot of my engagements are with companies that either have no staff or are kind of at the beginning of a security program. And I'm seeing a lot more interest in building that out, understanding more about what their risk looks like and explaining to their business in terms that they can understand what that risk means and what investment they need. So hopefully we can start seeing more of those opportunities coming up so that we can kind of shift the risk back right on the table. It's not just a line item you're cutting, you're taking a risk. And are you aware of those risks?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think as we dive into some of the other things that we're seeing when it comes to, okay, we've got security leaders, great security leaders that have been cut from their jobs. And this is one of the first times I've ever seen this. I've been in recruiting for 6 years, so I haven't been through some of the major recessions that we had, like in '08, and even previous to that. But from a security leadership perspective, this is one of the first, I think, in general that we've seen in a while. So Marty, love to hear your perspective. You went through this, unfortunately, but you have a great success story, and we're really excited to hear it. So talk to us a little bit about what happened. I believe you got laid off, and what was that like? What was the process going through and applying? And we'd just love to hear your story.
Yeah, for sure. So appreciate it. And I was caught off guard when I was released. And it was released mostly for a startup organization that had to cut and do necessary cutbacks. And the concern that they had of we're going to enter in a recession and what's going to happen with the way the government works now. So, and just from a security leader standpoint, that was like, yeah, I was like, okay, I've had to cut engineers before or analysts, whatever, because of downsizing, but never in a leadership standpoint. So, and what I jumped into was a year ago, I could probably get some in relatively quickly within a couple weeks time. And I thought to myself, like, okay, I have a plan. I'll be back in the market because everything happened at the beginning, the first week of June. And I thought to myself, oh, I'll be back in end of June, end of July, by the time I interview and everything too. End of June came and it was quiet. And yeah, I had some interviews here and there and whatnot, but then end of July came and I still nothing. I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe it's not going to be end of August, right? So, and my process though, if you go back to like the process standpoint was like, I reached out to Jesse, you and I talked, and
Yeah, we did.
you know, a good piece of advice you gave me was you need to establish your brand, right? Like you looked at my profile, you said like, yeah, you've got a great start, but you need to stand out more to the competition now because we're seeing this now where people are getting laid off in their positions. And it's happening in cybersecurity where we thought it wouldn't happen in cybersecurity because we know that it's such a high demand and high need for organizations for protection. But if you think about like where we are for cyber, like, well, we're an insurance policy for for organizations, right? If you think about it that way, we don't make direct money for them. We're not in sales, right? We're not making that. So and it's like, well, there's an impact. Release those people because maybe we can accept that risk. But you gave me that advice of establish the brand. And I took that advice seriously. So like the next day I was updating my profile and I was changing how I posted things on LinkedIn. And I think a good piece of advice too was post things about like, tell your story, tell like where your knowledge at, right? Talk about one of my strengths I feel as though is in the technical side of things and translating that to the business language, as well as risk management. And I started posting things about that on my social media. And it garnered significant feedback. And all of a sudden I saw my network spike up, right? And I saw like, oh, now you have 100 people that want to talk with you. And they're not just salespeople, they're people in the security field. And then you get some people saying, hey, I'm going through the same thing you're going. How can you help me, right? So you put yourself out there. And I think from a networking standpoint, I grew my network in time. I grew my network probably by close to 300 people. And a lot of that was in the community, whether they were peers, engineers, analysts, and that really helped get my brand kind of established, right? And I'm nowhere near done, right? So, I mean, that takes time to build that brand and that recognition and everything too that's out there. But like you send applications in, and I think to touch on your second point here is what was my process like, right? You send applications and you think like, okay, I want to target this position, right? I'm in this function now. I'm a director. I'm a leader position. I've directed engineering teams. I've been in operations. I've been in a lot of different areas of security. And I know that I want to stay in this position or be great at this. I don't want to, I know that my non-negotiable was I didn't want to take a step back, right? I didn't want to go back into being an analyst again. So, the struggle was because of all the people that were laid off is the competition. I mean, you were, and it's almost disheartening to see like, okay, I'm going to apply for a director position. And then you're one of the first 25 applicants. You hit refresh and the day later, and now it says there's 1,000. And you're like, crap. How am I going to stand out in that? So it's tough to be able to do that. And I think as part of my process, what I was doing was I was finding the hiring manager. I was finding the recruiter, the internal recruiter, the external recruiter. I was finding, and if I couldn't find them, I was trying to find that piece internally with somebody that could put me in front of that person. Mm-hmm. And that was huge, right? And that was huge to be able to help get my foot in the door to get that interview, whether it was a screening or a second interview. So, but it was a roller coaster ride. I mean, it was like there were weeks where it was nothing. And then there were weeks it was just tons of feedback and whatnot. And I think some of that had to do with holidays, the summertime, PTOs, and that kind of stuff. So you can leverage things like AI and everything too, which I did. And I didn't to the extent where I relied on it solely as the only method to contact people, but it was a good method to start, right? So I didn't have to draft new messages these people every single time. I could tweak them, right? I could start here and then make my tweaks and make it more personable as well too. So I think like short answer, long story to your question that I'm giving you, but I mean, leveraging what's out there in the network aspect, updating your brand and everything too, and being really maintain positivity that you're going to get something, it's going to happen, really it goes a long way. Just that networking piece too. And reach out to even recruiters such as yourself, Jesse. I mean, and talking to people and making those contacts with people for sure.
Yeah. How many applications do you think you filled out?
I did close to, I would say maybe 250, probably between the 2 to 250. And the thing that I guess the biggest frustration I had during the application process wasn't just solely like ATS kicking me out, because I knew ATS was kicking me out in a lot of cases because it wasn't hitting a keyword. And I added the plugins to the web browser that would scan job descriptions and look and compare to your resume for ATS. But actually that part was kind of easier to tune, right? And work with. ATS is just ATS. But, the thing that did frustrate me was how many accounts I had to create, and the Workday accounts and the ADP accounts and everything like that. And then you had other companies that you were using modern programs like Greenhouse, whatever it is, to take in applications, which is like, oh, thank God I don't have to create a thing. But I mean, I was looking through my password vault the other day and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all of these I created. This is crazy. And now they're like, now I have in cybersecurity hats on now, like now I have another area where a point of compromise cap with my data is being shared with them, and I didn't get a job there, and now they have my data and they could be lost because of a weak system. So yeah.
I feel like Jesse's feedback around building your brand was spot on, and we talked about that with Yuri as well last time we had a conversation around what are you putting out there. In my experience, I came from a 13-year corporate company experience where I had a reputation, but it was more internal within that company. I almost had nothing in terms of a brand outside of that company. And then thinking about that strategy of what I want to build was overwhelming, right? What do I build? Where do I build? What do I do? Yeah. Right? So Jesse gave me very similar advice, and it was really good advice around, think about that and on purpose with that, and think about what you want next, put that out there. And then start doing the networking piece, just like you've been doing as well, which is those are connections. Those are things that, can pay off in the long term, right? Those are not short term, right? As you build connections, networks with people, who knows where the future goes. But it's awesome to hear the energy you put into it as well, right? You seem like you were very motivated. This didn't phase you. What would you say to people that lose that steam, right? They go through this experience, they feel beat down, right? How would you give advice for people that feel that way, right? What kept you fueled and going to wake up every day, have a schedule, right? Because that's really important, right? Having kind of structure to your day, even though you're not logging on to work.
Yeah. And finding a job is a full-time job. I mean, in itself, because And to go to your point here, I had a lot of family support, and I had a lot of support in general, whether it was my wife, my parents who don't live here, they live in Colorado, my wife's parents, but the other support I had was in the community. So, and one of the things I did on several times is I went out there to local events, right? I couldn't afford to pay to go to Black Hat on my own, right? That's several $1,000. And when you're out of a job, even with unemployment or whatever you have that standpoint, you need to survive, right? So you're not going to have unnecessary expenditures. And so, but I was finding local free things to go to, right? Where could I go to in the in my case, Chicagoland market, that were things that were supported by the community that were just free to attend and make a network. And I found that when I went to these, I was not alone. And I had peers of mine at the level that I was at, even people who were above my level, that were in the same boat. They had just recently been laid off as well too, and they were searching. And it helps to feed off of that, right? Because you're helping each other. And I found that I reached out to them on LinkedIn. We made connections and exchanged contact information. And then you find that they are sending you different jobs. Like, hey, I didn't work out over here for me, but I'm going to refer you to get into here, right? So that community outreach helped me stay positive because I knew that I'm not alone in this. We're going to get through this. And the support that was provided to me by my network, as well as my family and my friends, to say, like, you're going to get through this. What can we do to help you? And that help could be like just that, getting that name out there and reaching out to contacts. I have a best friend of mine who's 25 years. I've known him, and his wife is in the tech space too. And she has contacts. And I said, look, because he had more contacts and everyone else had more contacts. And when you start reaching that pool, but just the amount of support I had from family, friends, and the community was huge. That motivated me to keep going, and knowing the fact of, yeah, it may not take 2 weeks. It may take a couple months, but it's going to happen. We're in a field that I think still is in high demand, even with the layoffs that have happened, that people are going to start hiring for, and you will get back into it. So, and reach out to people to say, like, just a video call, even just a phone call. I mean, I think it was important, like when I lost my job, besides talking to Jesse and giving the brand feedback, but he gave me good support to say, like, this is what we're seeing. How can I help you? Right. And I think that support as community is huge. So that helped me keep motivated. But on the flip side of that, there was a time that honestly, like in August, early August, there was a week where it was tough. And that was because you had layoffs happening. You had Rapid7, you had KPMG, and all of a sudden T-Mobile. I mean, it was just like, and you're like, oh my gosh, like now the pool is getting bigger. Like, so yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I remember that a lot of folks were starting to freak out a little bit more that we're still looking. And that was a challenging time in August. But also the other thing that is good to talk to recruiters is we know the hiring cycles. If you haven't been in as much hiring, which as a leader, I'm sure you have, but we see it more commonly for the trends, right? We know that typically August is not the busy time because everybody's finishing up their vacations and getting ready for their kids to start school again in September for most part. So then you don't really see hiring ramp up till early to mid-September, which is kind of where we are now, late September, and already seeing a lot of new jobs being posted, right? So, okay, boom, that's the trend. No matter if we're in a recession or not, there's always the cycles that stay pretty consistent over years. So, Marty, I think what would be also helpful, people like to see practical things, right, that they can apply if they're in the same position as you. Tell us a little bit about the story of how you got to this most recent job that you're in now, and how did it all happen? I'd love to hear the details.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that, in between everything that was happening is I was putting myself out there, not just from a brand perspective, but I was putting myself out there just to get some sort of financial income in. So you can leverage services like Upwork or Fiverr or whatever, just to get something, right? Get your name out there, because there's people who are hiring for contract or consulting, right? That they'll pay the money just to say, we only need temporary help, right? So that was helpful from that perspective. So what had happened though was I had made a post, and I had made a post on LinkedIn. I think it was about the 9 or 10 week mark that I was out of a position, which was about mid-August-ish timeframe, I believe, or late August. And the general counsel for the company I work for now, she was like a connection of a connection kind of a thing, right? I had a connection on there, and that connection had re-shared my post. And my post was different though. My post was like, you look out on LinkedIn and you see a lot of people like I feel your heart literally says, oh my gosh, I want to help you, right? But you see a lot of the stories from people saying like, I'm not out of a job for 6 months, I'm financially struggling. And like, yes, your heart says like, oh my gosh, I want to help you. But what you need to do is you need to talk about, what are you good at, right? And what are you doing? What do you bring to the table? Because a company is not looking to say like, yeah, you're financially struggling, but how are you going to help the organization out? So I made a post where I talked about, yep, I've been laid off for 9-10 weeks, but I talked about like, these are my strengths. This is one of my accomplishments. This is what I've done through the years. And I scanned through in a brief summary of essentially my resume. I didn't want to give all my points out my resume because I wanted to capture them. I wanted them to call me to get the rest of the details, but I highlighted the big things. And I talked about, hey, I'm not willing to relocate. I want to stay here in Chicagoland at this time. And I talked about the fact that I'm looking for a leadership position in what I do for security engineering teams and leading programs, so on and so forth. So a friend of a friend essentially reshared my post, and I got reshared out a lot. And the general counsel at this organization saw it, and she poked the CTO at this company and said, hey, look, I know that we're looking for a security person to come lead a program. Check this guy out. And don't just look at the fact that, yeah, he lost a job, but the fact that look at what he's done. And so the CTO wound up giving me a call and said, hey, I you actually called me during dinner, and I was like, hey, can I call you tomorrow? Because I'm right now with my kids. I'm actually like literally cooking and my hands are filthy. and I talked to him the next day, and he says, look, this is the company we are. This is the position we're looking for. And him and I just like, we clicked, like everything that we talked about. And it wasn't just the organization. It was the how did him and I communicate with each other? And it felt like this feels right. Like this is a company I want to work for, and this is a boss I want to work for. So it was really through that networking piece and how I posted things on LinkedIn and how it was shared out to people that I was able to secure the job. And he went through a formal interview with me, and we did that whole process. And I think that towards one of the things that stood out to me about him was that at the end of the interview, he said to me that, look, I am not a person that has to send you through 20 rounds of interviews that some other companies will. Like, I think you'd be an excellent fit here. And I think that we're just going to give me till after Labor Day holiday. And I think we're just going to want to make an offer because it'd be perfect for you. So, and that's what happened after Labor Day on that Wednesday afternoon. They sent me a informal offer, verbal offer. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. What a great story, Marty.
That's awesome that it almost sounds like you guys had a connection before you started going through the process, right? And the way you guys connected kind of streamlined you through their process, right? Where he had a good feeling about you, good first impression. And those are so critical, right? When you do get that opportunity to be on the phone, to be in front of a Zoom with someone, can you go beyond the interview questions? Can you build that connection with someone, right? And build some kind of rapport where they think about you. They're like, yeah, I could see that. And that's awesome. That sounds like that played in your favor. And a lot of times there's many candidates interviewing and you're the next person on their list. There's no connection.
Correct.
There's just, here are 10 questions I'm going to ask you. I've got 30 minutes.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. Well, I think we can take a couple things from your process, right? You were able to leverage a combination of things. So first, you started with your network, right? Start reaching out to folks that may be able to help you with insight. So talking to recruiters, like, look, we're happy to have conversations because here's the thing, we understand, we know this is good recruiters at least, right? We know this is a long game. And so Marty and maybe I can't help place him and make money helping him. Right. That doesn't matter. My goal is, how can I put advice and help out into the community? And I think a lot of people think the same way that are already in the same field as well, right? Like, hey, I'm going to sow good seed into the world and know that long-term I'll see the benefits of that in some way, right? Even if I don't, it's great to help somebody else. And I think having the right mentality of being a resource to help it made a difference. And then so he starts networking. He used ChatGPT to help with some of the messaging he needed, maybe even helping with some of the posts that you created, right? I was just looking at your post here, and you did a great job of being specific about what you accomplished. Like, hey, here's my key accomplishments. And then here's a little bit about what I'm looking for. But you were very concise, to the point. And look, if you're not a great writer or you just become very verbose, use ChatGPT to help you, like use the tools that are out there to make this a little bit more simple, enhance or augment your weaknesses. And that's what you did, Marty. And that power of what we're seeing with LinkedIn now, right? It's becoming all about content, and people find you in really interesting ways through the algorithm. And it's like, I don't know how it all happens, but it seems to happen, right? But you were consistent. I saw your posts. This wasn't the first post that you made.
Yes.
And that's probably why.
Yeah. Right.
Ramin, any thoughts that you wanted to mention on that from your perspective as well? I mean, this is a great story.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what else you did in your time off. Did you do any training, any recommendations, people that are trying to keep their skills sharpened, or if they're curious about a different part of cybersecurity? What would you recommend there, right? For example, when I came out into the market as well, I asked myself, what am I good at, right? And I kind of started going towards consulting when I realized, similar to you, I'm not an engineer. I'm no longer an analyst. I've done those roles before, but I really enjoy more the engagement side, figuring out how to solve problems, which kind of drove me towards consulting in my journey. And then I started figuring out taking steps there, right? Putting in some effort, learning some lessons, getting some mentors in that space, even learning to work with Jesse on doing a podcast, right? This is all kind of new territory to try to go towards a new set of skills. Love to hear from you during that time. What did you do in terms of skills as well? And what would you recommend? Because I know a lot of people that are currently laid off. I've had people reach out to me asking, what should I do with my time? Should I go for the next certification? Should it be technical? Should it be CISSP? Or what would you think there?
Yeah, and a lot of my time, I mean, between looking for networking, I took probably about 3 to 4 hours at least a day trying to find my next employer. I mean, kids would go on the bus, or excuse me, it was summertime, so they wouldn't go on the bus, but because they go on the bus now, so I'm doing that. But kids would wake up, and my wife actually wound up picking up more hours for her job. So, but I would spend about 3 to 4 hours in the morning as they were doing their own thing, getting ready, waking up, whatever it is, trying to find a job. But the rest of the day was, what can I do? Where are my gaps? No one's perfect, right? We're all human, right? And we know that we're always going to enhance our skill set. And especially in cyber, you know, like my dad will tell me, he's a retired IT manager, and he'll say to me, like, son, I don't know how you keep up with all these threats. And I says, you're right. It's not once a year or whatever it is. It's daily, right? This is every single day, you know, that something has happened. We have to stay up to date on that stuff. So keeping my skills and knowing the fact of, okay, where was I weak at? Like, what was my weaknesses, and how can I make that better right now while I'm off? That I have the time now, right? Because maybe I didn't have the time when I was working because maybe I was too busy or just couldn't carve out the time to do that, right? So now I have the time, and how can I fill those gaps? And maybe I wasn't necessarily going after certifications, but I was going after improving what my weakest points were, to make those stronger, knowing the fact that I had gaps. But not just in security though, but in my position as a leadership position, I was also doing continuing training about leadership, right? And business, and knowing the fact of that. Yes, we know that in security, we talk about risk management and everything too, especially to our board of directors and our C-suite. But how can I maybe better manage my staff? How can I be able to talk about different aspects with business, whether it be sales people or marketing or whatnot? So being able to enhance my skill set as a leader was definitely something that I also did during my time off too. So a lot of like self-improvement and keeping up to date on what was going on and keeping current on what was going on in the security area as well too. So
it's the soft skills. It sounds like you spent a lot of time on, and it shows, right? The soft skills that's where it's harder, right? There's less of, I know I need this certificate. I know I need 3 months worth of training. It's not that easy, right? It's kind of waking up every day and be like, how can I learn more, right? And be curious and start kind of filling in some of these curiosity points that I have.
Well, and think about if if you stopped, like, I mean, if you're unemployed for 3 or 4 months, and I mean, listen, security, that 3 or 4 months in security is huge. Like, if you stopped, like, and all of a sudden you go back into it and didn't do anything for security, you're behind now 4 months. I mean, that's big. So during that time, you still have to be like, yeah, I'm still working, but I'm not working for an employer, but I'm still working because I still need to keep up with these things that are going on out there because of changing environment that happens. So you have to keep learning. You can't stop it.
Yeah.
It's interesting the way you frame it. It almost makes me think you have to take charge of your own narrative, right? You have that moment of reflection when you are unfortunately without a job. Reflect on that, right? Where do you want to go, right? Create that vision, and then start filling your time with the right action, one day at a time, and then stay motivated as you go through it. And I like the way you put it. You knew there was going to be an end date. You knew there was going to be a moment in time. You had faith in that, and then you're just showing up every day, right? And you knew what you needed to fill up your day with, which is awesome.
Yep,
it's great. Well, I think we're at the end of our show here. Marty, anything that would be helpful for the audience? Are you hiring on your team right now, or if anybody's listening here, they're looking to work with you?
I am the 10th day into my job. I started on the 11th of September. So, and I will hopefully be hiring in the very near future. So maybe by the end of the year. So I'll hopefully have some openings here shortly as I build out the program. But the piece of advice I can give to everybody is make sure you're getting that community outreach. Make sure you're getting that support. Don't be scared to ask for support. I mean, and honestly, like, take care of your mental health too during this time while you're off, because that's important. But, using that community outreach, network with people, keep your skill set up to date, stay positive. One of the things, ironically, that happened, Jesse and I, you talked about this last week, is that post everything happening, I sent those applications in 250 applications. I'm getting callbacks now when I'm like, still like, come on, guys, I did that like 2 months ago. So there's definitely a September surge that we're seeing that, because suddenly now people are like, hey, we're hiring. So it's going to happen.
Yeah. You have to I've been telling people, you got to take the emotion out of the process. It's got to become emotionless. Just like sales for me is, I have to become emotionless. I can't keep looking for the result. Or it's like when you plant a seed in the ground, you can't keep uncovering it and checking. Is there a root yet? Is it started to grow yet? No, you just have to let it go through its process. And I feel like this is similar.
Yep. So, exactly.
And that's the hard
really
part. You got to show up every day and do that same level of effort, right? Without knowing where that's going to go.
Yeah.
Yep. Right.
Absolutely. No, that's great, Ramin, for sure. Consistency is key here. So we want to thank everyone who's been watching. Hopefully this was helpful. Marty, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your story. And we're so excited for you and all the things you're going to accomplish. And hopefully if you're an engineer out there watching this and you want to work with Marty, reach out to him, build the connection now so that when he's hiring, you have the opportunity to work with a great guy.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Marty.
All right. Well, until then, we will continue our journey to secure the future. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Securing the Future podcast with your hosts, Jesse Metters and Ramin Lamay. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a rating.